When Eleanor Harper signed over her home to help her son and his wife get back on their feet, she never imagined it would lead to betrayal. For decades, her house on Maple Avenue had been the heart of her family, filled with memories of her late husband, the laughter of grandchildren, and the quiet triumphs of a life lived with sacrifice and love. But after a series of cold decisions by her son, what began as a gift of trust turned into a slow erasure of her place in the home she once called hers. Eleanor's journey is one that speaks to every parent who has given endlessly, to every woman who has put family first at the cost of herself, and to every soul who has faced the painful choice between keeping peace or standing up for dignity. This is not just a story about a house, it's about reclaiming identity, drawing hard lines, and the bittersweet reality that sometimes the greatest battles are fought within our own families. It had started with a favor, nothing more. Eleanor Harper had spent nearly 4 decades in her cozy home on Maple Avenue. It was where she raised her son, Derek, mourned the passing of her husband, and built a life carved out of quiet sacrifice. When Derek and his wife Julia fell into financial trouble, Eleanor didn't hesitate. She transferred the house into their name so they could refinance it under better terms. She trusted them. After all, she was their mother, always there, always giving. But what began as a temporary arrangement slowly morphed into something else entirely. It started with subtle shifts. Eleanor was asked to downsize her space in the house, then gently encouraged to consider moving out for a while so the couple could do renovations. She ended up living in a friend's spare room, still making payments on the house loan, still covering expenses. All while her son and daughter-in-law redecorated what used to be her home with cold minimalism and brushed nickel fixtures. When she asked when she could move back in, Julia hesitated. Derek looked away, and then came the blow. They had decided to sell the house. They needed the money. It was part of a new plan for a better life, for a dream home in a neighborhood called Willow Heights. They expected Eleanor to understand, to support the plan like she always did. But something snapped in her that day. "I'm not just a chapter in your financial plan," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "This is my home." She signed it over. Julia reminded her coolly. "Yes," Eleanor replied. "To help you, not to be discarded." The next few weeks were a blur of silent phone calls, unopened emails, and lawyer consultations. Eleanor discovered the house was technically in their name, but she still held a lien on it one they couldn't clear without her approval. It was the one piece of power she had left, and they were furious she dared to use it. Then Derek came to visit her at Rosie's Cafe, where she had picked up shifts to stay afloat. "Mom, be reasonable," he said, sitting across from her during her break. "You can't keep working here. You're almost 60. I'm 58, she corrected. "We need this house sold. We already made an offer on the new place. Emma deserves a better environment." Eleanor studied the man across from her. He had her son's face, but none of his warmth. "And what about me? Am I just in the way now?" Derek leaned back. "If you don't help us, you're choosing the house over your family." Over Emma? It was a cruel thing to say. A line drawn in the sand. "I'm not choosing the house," she said quietly. "I'm choosing not to be erased." The next day, Eleanor arrived early at the office of Brian Keller, her longtime lawyer. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a manila folder against her chest, the weight of years of memories pressing down on her like bricks. She hadn't slept much the night before. Every decision, every moment of her motherhood kept replaying in her mind. Where had she gone wrong? At precisely 2 p.m., Derek and Julia walked in. They looked polished, like real estate agents. Julia wore a sleek blazer over a cream blouse. Derek's shoes still bore the marks of power, though his eyes flickered with unease. They nodded stiffly to Eleanor before sitting across from her. Brian cleared his throat and began formally. "Mrs. Harper has considered your proposal regarding the house on Maple Avenue." Julia leaned forward, her voice syrupy. We appreciate her time. We believe this can be a win-win situation." Brian didn't smile. He slid a paper across. "The desk here is Mrs. Harper's counter offer." Derek picked it up. His eyes darted across the page. Slowly, his expression changed from hopeful to confused to stunned. "What is this?" Eleanor looked him straight in the eye. "It's the only deal I'll accept. I will continue paying the mortgage, but the house stays in my name. You two will not sell it." "I'm taking it back." Julia snatched the paper from Derek's hand. Her mouth fell open. "This is absurd. You want us to sell you the house for the remaining loan balance? It's worth at least 3 times that. It's worth exactly what I've poured into." "If for 35 years," Eleanor replied, "I made every repair. I paid every bill. I built that home." Derek's voice rose. "You signed it over. Legally, it's ours." With a lean, Brian interrupted coolly. "Which means you can't sell it without Mrs. Harper's approval. And right now, she's not approving anything." Julia's eyes narrowed. "We'll fight this. We'll get a lawyer." Eleanor nodded. "You're welcome to try. But court will take time. Months, maybe years. And during that time, your credit will continue to rot. That house in Willow Heights, it'll be gone." The silence was heavy, the weight of truth sinking in like cement. "You're doing this to punish us," Derek muttered, jaw clenched. "No," Eleanor replied. "Doing this because I finally realized you see me as a burden, not a person. You used me. You lied to me. Now I'm standing up for myself." Brian broke the silence. "Unless you're willing to accept her terms, there's nothing more to discuss." Julia stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. "This is insane. You've chosen a pile of wood and plaster over your family." Eleanor didn't flinch. "No, I've chosen my dignity over your entitlement." Derek hesitated. He looked at his mother for a long moment, something flickering in his eyes, anger, confusion, maybe, even regret. But he said nothing. He followed Julia out the door without a word. As they left, Eleanor exhaled slowly. Her body shook, but her heart beat steady. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she had taken her life back. Brian turned to her. "That was brave." "No," she whispered. "That was survival." The days that followed the confrontation at Brian's office were eerily quiet. Eleanor returned to Rosie's calf the next morning, her hands steadier, but her heart still raw. The clatter of plates and the smell of coffee gave her comfort. It was a routine she had known long before she was someone's mother or someone's burden. Rosie didn't ask questions. She only offered a tight hug and a fresh scone, warm from the oven. "You did what you had to," she whispered. But as Eleanor wiped tables and refilled cups, her mind wandered. Images of Derek as a boy haunted her, his toothy grin when he brought her dandelions, the way he clung to her hand his first day of school. How had that boy become the man who'd cornered her with ultimatums? Late that evening, after her shift, she found herself standing in the hallway of her home, staring at the family photos still hanging on the wall. One in particular caught her eye. Derek holding baby Emma, beaming with a pride so pure it looked like love. A knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts. 'Twas Martha. "Wine?" Martha asked, holding up a bottle. Eleanor nodded wordlessly, letting her in. They settled into the living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of the old house. Martha poured 2 glasses and raised hers, to drawing a line. Eleanor clinked her glass but didn't drink. "They're furious," she said finally. "I'd be more concerned if they weren't," Martha replied. "It means they didn't expect you to stand up for yourself." Eleanor sighed. "Do? You think I made a mistake?" "No," Martha said immediately. "You made a choice. There's a difference." "But Emma," Eleanor's voice cracked. "I miss her." Martha leaned forward. "That little girl knows who her grandmother is. Give it time." Eleanor nodded, but the ache in her chest didn't ease. Over the next few weeks, things grew colder. Derek didn't call, neither did Julia. There were no texts, no pictures of Emma. The silence was a punishment, and Eleanor felt every inch of it. But she refused to reach out first. Seed made her stand, and there would be no retreat. Then came the mail, a thick envelope from a law firm. Inside, papers demanding the release of the lien on the house, citing financial hardship and undue emotional distress. Eleanor read the words twice, her hands shaking not with fear, but fury. They were trying to paint her as the villain. She drove straight to Brian's office, skimmed the papers, then scoffed. "This is weak. Their case won't hold." "But they'll drag it out," Eleanor said. "They want to wear me down." Brian looked at her over his glasses. "Will they know?" she said, steel in her voice. "I've lived too long letting people take from me. I'm done." That night, she sat on the porch swing, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The house creaked around her like an old friend whispering encouragement. She remembered Richard, her late husband, how he used to sit in that very swing with a beer in hand, talking about retirement and fishing trips they never took. He'd built that house with his own two hands. He'd bled for it, and now their son wanted to sell it to strangers. Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the grief wash over her. But when she opened them again, she felt lighter. She had made the right choice, not just for herself, but for the woman she had become. It was early Saturday morning when Eleanor heard the sharp rapping on her front door. She opened it to find Julia standing there, arms crossed, eyes blazing. Jaw clenched so tight Eleanor could practically hear her teeth grind. "We need to talk," Julia snapped. Eleanor stepped aside, letting her in silently. They moved into the kitchen where the remnants of Eleanor's breakfast still sat on the table, half a cup of coffee. Toast with a bite taken out. Julia didn't wait. "You've gone too far." Eleanor arched a brow. "Too far?" This stunt with the lien, the conditions, the meeting with the lawyer. "What exactly are you trying to prove?" "That I'm done being used," Eleanor said flatly. Julia slammed her palm on the table. "This isn't just about you. Derek and I have worked for years to build a life. We're not trying to hurt you, we're trying to move forward." "By kicking me out of my own home," Eleanor countered. "You bought your future with my past. You gave him that house." Julia snapped. "No one forced you." Eleanor stood, slowly, her voice calm but trembling. "I gave it so. He'd have a chance to build something. I kept paying the mortgage even after it was no longer mine. I watched Emma so you two could have date nights. I sacrificed everything." "Julia, and you didn't even have the decency to tell me I'd be evicted. You just assumed I'd disappear quietly." Julia's nostrils flared. "You're twisting this. We offered you space in the new house." "In the basement," Eleanor said with a humorless laugh. "Storage boxes and laundry machines." "That's not space. That's exile." The silence that followed was thick. Julia's face was pale now. She opened her mouth to speak, then thought better of it. Finally, she turned and walked toward the door. Before she left, she looked over her shoulder and said, "You've made this very ugly." "No," Eleanor said softly. "You made it ugly. I just stopped pretending it wasn't." After Julia left, the tension didn't fade. If anything, it deepened. Phone calls stopped. Neighbors grew distant. Even Emma's school photo that usually came like clockwork each fall didn't arrive this year. Word must have spread distorted, one-sided, as these stories often are. Eleanor became the villain of a family drama no one cared to understand. The mother who refused to let go. The grandmother who held her love for ransom. It was easier for everyone to paint her that way. But inside her home, Eleanor was reclaiming more than just a house. She scrubbed Vanessa's sterile decor from the walls, replacing it with warm colors and hand-stitched curtains. She brought back the old photographs of Richard, of Derek as a child, before ambition hardened his smile. She unpacked her memories one by one, restoring the pieces of herself that had been packed away too long. Then, one day, a knock came again. Not at the door, at the window. A tiny hand pressed to the glass. Emma. Eleanor rushed to open it, heart thundering. Outside stood Emma, with her little pink backpack and a hopeful smile. "Daddy said I could come see you," she said shyly. Eleanor bent down, hugging her so tightly she was afraid she'd break her. "Does Mommy know?" Emma nodded. "She's in the car. But she said I could stay a while if you wanted." "I do," Eleanor whispered. "I really do." "Eh?" Spent the afternoon making cookies, painting rocks in the backyard, and telling stories about when Emma's daddy was her age. For those few hours, everything else faded. Later that night, as Eleanor watched Emma climb into Julia's car, she caught a brief glance from her daughter. Not warmth, not apology, but maybe, just maybe, a flicker of respect. The road to reconciliation wouldn't be easy. It might never fully come, but Eleanor wasn't waiting for permission anymore. She had her dignity back, and for the first time in years, she had hoped to. Weeks passed. Eleanor resumed her routine at Rosie's calf, her steps lighter now. Emma's visit had awakened something in her ember of joy she thought had long since burned out. But just as peace seemed within reach, another storm rolled in. It came in the form of a manila envelope, hand-delivered to the cafe. No return address. Eleanor opened it in the back room. Inside was a letter typed cold and a copy of a legal filing. She read the first line and her stomach dropped. Petition to challenge validity of lien and seek injunction against Eleanor Carter. Her hands trembled as she read on. Derek and Julia had filed to have the lien voided, their argument. Mental instability. That Eleanor had acted irrationally and emotionally, compromising her ability to make sound financial decisions. They wanted the courts to rule that she had no legal standing, and worse, that she might not be capable of managing her own affairs. Eleanor couldn't breathe. She sat there, staring at the page, her heart breaking in a way it hadn't even. When the house was nearly taken from her, it wasn't just betrayal, this was erasure. She had given her son everything. And now he was trying to take away the last thing she owned, her independence. Martha found her there an hour later, still holding the papers. "Oh God," Martha whispered after reading the documents. "They're trying to declare you incompetent." Eleanor nodded slowly. "He's not just trying to take the house, he's trying to take me." "Then we fight," Martha said fiercely. "We get a lawyer, a good one. This isn't over." And it wasn't. Brian Wallace brought in a litigation specialist. Eleanor began compiling decades of records, mortgage statements, bank transfers, receipts, notarized agreements, texts from Derek thanking her for making payments. She built her case brick by brick, like a fortress. She also had character witnesses. Rosa from the cafe, who testified to Eleanor's flawless bookkeeping. Jim, Martha's husband, who spoke about Eleanor's involvement in the community garden. Even Emma's piano teacher, who vouched for Eleanor's mental sharpness. But it was Eleanor's own voice that mattered most. On the day of the hearing, she stood in the courtroom, calm and poised, looked directly at her son as she spoke. "I raised Derek alone after my husband passed. I paid every bill, showed up at every school event, and put him through college, while working 2 jobs. I gave him this house because I believed in him. I supported him when no one else would. And now I'm standing here being told that because I finally said no, I must be unstable." Her voice never wavered. "This isn't about finances. This is about control, about a man who can't accept that his mother has boundaries." Was silence when she finished? Even the judge seemed moved. After deliberation, the court ruled in Eleanor's favor. The lien remained. The attempt to challenge her mental competency was dismissed with prejudice. Outside the courthouse, Eleanor didn't cry. She didn't smile either. She just breathed deeply, freely for the first time in months. Later that evening, Derek called. He didn't apologize, just said, "Well, I hope you're happy." Now, Eleanor responded softly, "No, Derek, I'm not happy. But I'm free," and she hung up. That night, she lit a single candle in the living room and sat beside it in silence. The walls around her glowed gold and warm, like they remembered her laughter, Richard's stories, Emma's tiny footsteps. This house, once almost lost, was no longer just a building. It was proof that she mattered, that her life, her story couldn't be overwritten. And now, finally, she was ready to write the next chapter. Autumn arrived quietly. Leaves fell like whispered apologies, carpeting the sidewalks in amber and rust. Eleanor found comfort in the season. It felt honest, things falling away, revealing what was real underneath. After the lawsuit, the house became a sanctuary again. She didn't redecorate or renovate. Instead, she reclaimed. She brought back the old curtains, dug Richard's hand-carved rocking chair out of the attic, and filled the kitchen with the scent of cinnamon and rosemary. She no longer avoided the porch swing. One evening, as the wind rustled the trees outside, Eleanor sat with a cup of tea and stared at the street. Life went on out there, and in her chest something thawed. She was ready. The next morning, she wrote a letter, handwritten, careful, and brief. Dear Emma, I miss you. I hope school is going well. If you'd ever like to visit or have lunch together, my door is always open. With love, Grandma Ellie. She mailed it, unsure if it would reach her, unsure if Julia would intercept it, unsure of anything. But 2 weeks later, there was a knock at the door. Eleanor opened it to find Emma, backpack slung over one shoulder, holding a small envelope. She'll let me come, Emma said quietly. I had to promise it was just for an hour. Eleanor nodded, swallowing emotion. Come in, sweetheart. They sat at the kitchen table, the one Emma had once scattered with crayons and cookie dough. Now she was 10 taller, quieter, her eyes shadowed with things she didn't yet know how to say. Is it true? Emma asked. Did you and Daddy fight about the house? Eleanor hesitated. Yes, sweetheart, but not because I didn't love him. Sometimes adults forget how to listen to each other, and sometimes love means saying no. Emma nodded slowly, chewing her bottom lip. I missed you. I missed you more, Eleanor whispered. They made sandwiches and ate them on the porch. Emma told her about school, a science project involving celery and food coloring, a friend named Chloe who had a hamster. When it was time to go, Emma hugged her fiercely. Can I come again? Anytime, Eleanor said. Always. As Emma disappeared down the sidewalk, escorted by Julia's car idling at the corner, Eleanor stood a while longer, heart both aching and full. Later that week, a second knock came. This time, it was Julia. She looked tired, too thin, her hair scraped into a hasty ponytail. I wanted to see the house, she said, to understand what all this was about. Eleanor let her in warily. Julia walked through the living room in silence, trailing her fingers along the mantel. This place meant something to you, she said finally. I didn't see it, just saw an asset, a number on a page. Eleanor offered her tea. They sat across from one another, not as enemies, but not quite as family. I don't know if Derek will ever understand, Julia said. He's angry and hurt. But I'm sorry for what we did. Eleanor nodded. Thank you for letting Emma visit. That means everything. I'll bring her again, Julia promised. Even if Derek doesn't come around, she needs her grandma. That night, Eleanor stood at the upstairs window and looked out over her yard. The tulips had long since withered. But beneath the soil she knew, the bulbs slept, ready to bloom again in spring. So was she. The days grew. Shorter nights came earlier, and the chill in the air deepened. But Eleanor felt none of the cold she once did. Her house, her home, had become a place of warmth again, filled with the quiet hum of healing. Every Saturday now, Emma came over. They baked planted daffodils in the backyard and painted birdhouses. Sometimes they watched old movies while wrapped in blankets. Sometimes they said very little at all. But in those silences, there was peace. And occasionally, Julia came too. She no longer tried to explain or defend. She just sat, sipped tea, and helped Eleanor fold laundry or wash dishes. A quiet truce had formed, one built not on perfect forgiveness but on shared love for a little girl with a bright laugh. As for Derek, he stayed away. Eleanor had stopped expecting an apology or even understanding. She had accepted that some relationships might never be repaired. But she also knew that life could surprise you just as it had the day Emma knocked on her door. One afternoon, Eleanor was pruning the rose bushes when she saw a man standing at the gate. Derek, he looked older, more tired, like someone who had finally run out of anger. His eyes met hers, unsure, almost childlike. "I don't want to fight," he said. Eleanor wiped her hands on her gardening apron and walked slowly to the gate. "I'm not here to beg for the house back," Derek added. "I know what it means to you now. I was too wrapped up in my own plans to see it." Eleanor said nothing. She let the silence speak for her. "I've been thinking," Derek continued. "Emma's happier when she sees you. Julia says, you've been kind. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but maybe we could try. I miss ... I miss having a mom." It took a moment for Eleanor to find her voice. "I never stopped being one," she said softly. "But I won't be taken for granted again. If you want to be in my life, it has to be different this time." Derek nodded. "I understand. I'll try." She opened the gate. They didn't hug. Not yet. But he stepped through, and they walked side by side toward the porch, like two people learning how to meet each other again. That evening, the family gathered for dinner. Julia brought dessert. Emma wore a handmade bracelet she said was for Grandma only. Derek helped Eleanor fix the loose step on the porch, something Richard had always meant to get around to. The laughter around the table didn't erase the pain of the past, but it softened it. It made it easier to carry. Later that night, when the dishes were washed and the house had quieted, Eleanor sat at the window, her cat purring at her feet. Outside, the wind whispered through bare branches. She thought of Richard, of his steady presence, of how proud he'd be. She thought of the woman she'd once been accommodating, quiet, endlessly giving. And of the woman she was now strong, unshaken, unafraid to claim what was hers. She was no longer invisible. The house no longer echoed with memories of what was lost, but glowed with the possibilities of what could still be. Spring would come again. She could already feel it stirring in the walls of her home, in the laughter of her granddaughter, in the tentative steps of a son trying to find his way back. This time, Eleanor wouldn't just survive, she would bloom. Eleanor's story is not just about a house. It's about what that house stood for: years of love, sacrifice, and the invisible labor of a woman who gave everything for her family, until they forgot what she was worth. When her own children tried to erase her, to trade her years of devotion for a few bricks in a better neighborhood, she did something rare. She said no. She chose dignity over comfort, principle over pressure, self-respect over silence. And in doing so, she didn't just reclaim a home, she reclaimed herself. In a world that too often tells older women to step aside, to become quiet, to give more even when there's nothing left, Eleanor reminded us all of something vital. That it is never too late to take your power back. Never too late to draw a line. Never too late to say, "This is mine, I matter." Her son may never fully understand the pain he caused. Her daughter-in-law may never apologize. But Eleanor no longer needs them to. She has found strength in truth. She has found love in chosen family. And she has found peace in her own skin, under her own roof, on her own terms. To every woman who's ever felt used, overlooked, or replaced, let this be your reminder. Your life is still yours. Your worth is not up for debate. And your story isn't over, not by a long shot. Eleanor's journey is proof. Even when everything is stripped away, the roots remain. And from them, something strong, wild, and beautiful can grow again. Because sometimes, the greatest home you'll ever fight for is the one inside yourself. Thank you for watching until the end of this story. If you saw a part of yourself in Eleanor's journey, this story touched your heart. Please give it a like to support those who are bravely reclaiming their lives. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another real, emotional, and deeply human story. And leave a comment below. What do you think about Eleanor's decision? What would you do if you were in her place? Real moments, sharing true stories. For real people, thank you for being with us. See you in the next video.